Hello and good evening. I'd like to give a little talk today about different types of human beings. Okay. This was a talk that I gave myself actually, and it's about the different types of human beings. Humans are divided into two types. We have been walking this planet for the past 200,000 years, and as an evolved species, possibly even more than that. And throughout that time of our history, most of the time of our history, we have been hunter-gatherers. Only 10,000 years ago, possibly, did we start to become sedentary. And that is because of the finding of grass. Okay? Grass changed us from nomadic hunter-gatherers to agriculturalists. And today, cities, towns, and even the humble village can all trace its way back to how grass controlled man. Okay, grass needs to be cultivated. And the food that comes from grass, like the grains, such as rice in Asia, wheat in Europe, wheat and barley in Europe, and also corn in the Americas, really settled human beings into a life of cultivation. And from that cultivation came the calendar based on the seasons of the year and so forth. And from those settlements became villages, those villages became towns, those towns traded with other towns, it became cities, became centers of empire and trade. And of course, religion evolved around the various gods that were in charge of various things that controlled that process, really. Without grass, we would be following animals. We would be herdsmen. We'd be following the reindeer herds to better grazing opportunities, okay? And they, in turn, would determine our lives. And that's known as a hunter-gatherer society. History was turned upside down when in the early 2000s, a place called Göbekli Tepe, or known as the Pot-Belly Hill in Turkish, was founded by an archaeologist, a German archaeologist. And when he found Göbekli Tepe, it really turned our notion of history upside down. We thought that agriculture was the condition for sedentary living, and we thought that religion developed from that. Göbekli Tepe is the other way around. It was actually built during hunter-gatherers that built the temple of Göbekli Tepe, and that temple was used as a religious place to gather people, and eventually they did create a city. There's a Çatalhöyük city, an old city in Turkey, where people actually went from one house to the other over the rooftops. So can you imagine, the entire city was linked over the rooftops. You had to go up to the roof and connect to the next house and then go down the ladder into another house. There must have been a house where there was a gateway to the outside world, but within that city, everyone was connected through rooftops. How cool is that? Just imagine if Kuching or if Singapore or if any modern city had that kind of connection with rooftops. Wouldn't that be quite amazing? But anyway, coming back to this idea of the two human beings, because I've always kind of struggled in my life. Why am I the sort of person that's rebellious? Why am I the sort of person that cannot follow orders? Why am I the sort of person that thinks that everyone else is wrong except me? Because I'm from the former. My sort of personality came, and most autistic people are like this as well. We came from the former group, the hunter-gatherer group. When you hunt and gather berries, you have to think for yourself. You have to be on the defense all the time, if not on the offense most of the times. Because you're looking out for game, at the same time you're also looking out for animals that consider you prey. Okay? Not prey, but prey. So you could be an animal's prey. In other words, they could prey on you. Like a lion could attack you. At the same time, you're looking for sheep, you're looking for goats, you're looking for chickens and so forth. So you have to look after your group of wanderers and gatherers, and they all have to look out for each other. And because of that, it creates a very different type of mentality than from those who are agriculturalists, who follow the law, who just follow the things. Now, the types of people that are found in this one, compared to the types of people found in this one, are very different. Those are found amongst nomads, okay, are people who are like politicians, principals, teachers, narcissists, criminals. We're all in this place because we take life on our own, on ourselves, and we take risks, and nobody is addicts, okay, autistics, ADHD people, all of us, bipolar, we're all on this side. We're all grouped as the nomads, people who don't like to procreate. Like myself, I don't want to have any children. I want to be left alone. So those sort of people, they are on this side. We have our own ideas. We don't like to be disturbed. We're antisocial, but we like to control. And we like people to follow what we have to say. Okay? Kings, for instance. Okay? Prime ministers. I'll give you a couple of examples of people on that side, just so that you don't think that we're all criminals and crooks. But in fact, yes, criminals and crooks are there too. These are people that I admire, actually, like Lee Kuan Yew, Sir Oliver Cromwell. Yes, I do admire him to a certain extent. King Henry VIII, I know. Let's take a look at Sir Oliver Cromwell. Sir Oliver Cromwell, if you go and watch the movie with Richard Harris and Alec Guinness, it's a really lovely movie. I watched it the other day and really shows you the toughness, the faith that Oliver Cromwell has, and how nobody is above God for him, Only God is above him. He has that mindset. And the thing is, he is the first person, possibly in Western history, maybe, we have Brutus and we have other people who killed their kings, their leaders, like Julius Caesar. But in a modern time, at least as far as England is concerned, he is actually he is someone who commits regicide, and he is not a king that kills another king, like Henry Bolingbroke killed Richard II, Richard III killed Edward V. No, he's not like that. He is someone who's normal, like you and I, politician, and killed the king. He killed the king. The first form of regicide by the normal people. Before the French even started their French Revolution and killed their king, he killed his king. And that is a very admirable trait, I must say. Because we tend to respect our kings. We tend to be honorable. I mean, as far-fetched as we are, we never even dream of killing a king. But Oliver Cromwell did. And he did it because his religion, his Protestant religion, said that he needs to kill this king for all the corruption that came about during the king's reign. The king did not issue parliament in many years, and yet the king used up the purse, tried to get the common folk to pay up to help him, and yet Parliament was not eager, nor were they in that condition to just be called up by the king's will. Okay, Parliament. This is England, not France. This is the land of the Magna Carta, the common law. Monarchs usually are subservient to the will of the people. Also it was. But King Charles had different ideas. He believed he was of divine kingship, which means that God chose him and him alone as king. His wife was Catholic, and that was a big problem too, because England is a Protestant country with a Protestant parliament. So there was a big problem here. But after the Civil War was lost by the Cavaliers, who are the king's soldiers, eventually Charles had to face the scaffold. His head was cut off by the executioner's axe. At the end of the show, you get to see it. Alex Guinness, sometimes he says, I'll let me pray first, and when my hands are like this, you can strike my neck. That's what he said. And then his hands was like that, and off went his head. And Oliver Cromwell even dissolved Parliament after that, and says that he has to just rule by himself. So for the whole 1650s, England became a republic under Oliver Cromwell. And since then, Parliament, which is the constitution of the UK, had superseded the power of the king, the monarchy. And when it couldn't, in 1688, what happened? They removed the king and installed his daughter, and allowed the Dutch prince who married his daughter, William of Orange, to conquer England. And then when they restored the other sister Anne back into power, when she died in 1714, they turned over not to the original monarchy that was Catholic in France, Charles Edward Stuart or Francis Edward Stuart. They did not turn to him, or even King James. King James possibly dead by then. They turned over to Georg of Hanover, the son of the Electress Sophia of Hanover. So why did they do that? Because of Protestant succession, because of Act of Parliament. Parliament had the right to choose who was the succeeding king. And since then, the royal family of the UK have been of German descent. Okay? From the House of Hanover down to King Charles III today. It's a Germanic house. And it comes from the city of Hanover in Germany. The first king of the UK, because by this time it was the UK, could not speak English and did not appreciate English. So we can see how a human being of this type, of my type, changed things. Another good example is Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore. People think that Tunku Abdul Rahman was one of those leaders, really good leaders, but no, he wasn't. He was chosen to topple Dato' On bin Jaafar. Dato' On bin Jaafar would be more respected, actually, because he was a man who wanted to include Chinese and Indians possibly into UMNO, but eventually he created the Independent Malayan Party, IMP, and IMP died with him in the early 50s. It's possible he wouldn't be able to lead us into Merdeka already because he died before 57. But nevertheless, Tunku Abdul Rahman was his deputy and became the leader of UMNO and the chief minister of Malaya because he was very much able to toe the line. He was an agriculturalist. He came from the second group. He was an appeaser, which of course Sukarno hated. He did not like Tunku for being an appeaser because Indonesia fought for their independence. Pancasila was fought for in 1947. They fought the Dutch. Ho Chi Minh fought in Vietnam in the 1950s against the French, and then later on against the Americans. The communists fought for power in Vietnam. So they fought. It wasn't given to them. Like Merdeka was given to us without any fighting, which is why possibly today we are still in some identity crisis in our country. And Lee Kuan Yew also had to fight and go through a lot of carnage, a lot of problems, and he was astute to it. The one thing you can say about a leader like Lee Kuan Yew, like Oliver Cromwell, like Henry VIII, is that the country that they're in is not the same as the country that they've left. There's a before and after process. Before Lee Kuan Yew was Chief Minister or Prime Minister of Singapore in 1959, it was a very different country than it was when he died in 2015. Even though it was developed, it was a British port in 1959. And David Marshall failed to get independence in 1956 because, in some sense, the British still wanted to use the country and needed the country. But after the expulsion of Singapore from Malaysia in 1965, Lee Kuan Yew also tried to look into the fact of trying to expel the British presence in the ports there. And he was a no-nonsense person. And he was someone that you had to deal with, contend with. But he created a society where he brought the philosophy of Malaysian Malaysia into Singapore and made Singapore that which he wanted to make Malaysia, and that was a multicultural society with racial quotas in different parts of the city so that everywhere is equal. And I quite like that. I studied in Singapore for 4 years. I worked there as well, and I noticed that it doesn't deprive the Malays or any other group of any other thing because all are considered equal. There's no boomy discrimination going on in Singapore. It's all about meritocracy. And Singaporeans, in as much as you might want to give them money, like some Malays want to, politicians want to give them money so they can become part of Malaysia, they will refuse. They will not want to do that because they find that's a great place. And Lee Kuan Yew, salute to him, he changed the nature of a swamp third world city into a first world developed country, way ahead of us all. And it stands true, and that difference is because of him. Watch his 1980 or 81 speech where he brought down the pilots. There was a pilot union riot where SIA was brought down because of pilots not having adequate wages, and he came in and he says, I will have to force you or make the people of Singapore force you to give it up or to do it again. He says, no man can run this country. You must have the will to run this country. It says, that's what he said. He said, it takes that iron in you to rule this country. So either you break it or I will break it for you. It didn't take long for the pilots to reconsider. Either they would be fired or they will start from all over again. He doesn't care. And you look at the condition of Singapore Airlines today, it's really survived a lot of the challenges that brought Malaysia Airlines down. So you can see the difference. And that's one man. That's one man that refused to toe the line. And when American media asked him, why don't you have a foreign media in Singapore? He says, I know more about this country than the person who asked this question. Okay? It's a small boat. Singapore's a small country. You can't rock that kind of boat. You have to keep things accordingly. And look at the way the West looks today. The West looks far more disorganized and possibly going to be a backwater of Islamization as a result of poor political leadership. And you look at Singapore, and you can already tell the difference. In fact, even look at Malaysia, and you can tell that difference. Yeah, we're on the rise; they're going down. It's just a matter of life. This is what the Asian century is about. Lastly, I'd like to talk about King Henry VIII. King Henry VIII, a lot of people say, "Ooh, King Henry VIII, not so good." Actually, King Henry VIII had 6 wives. Okay, his first wife. Now you have to understand this. King Henry VIII was not afraid of the P word as Protestant. Protestantism was not his issue. With his son Edward VI, yes, Protestantism was an issue. Elizabeth I, Protestantism was an issue. But with Henry VIII, there was no Protestant. When he started in 1502, it was still another 15 years before Martin Luther laid his thesis at the cathedral in Wittenberg. So therefore there was no Protestant revolution yet. In fact, he was an upholder of the Roman Catholic Church. Yes, he defended it with his might. And in fact, to show how much of support he was for Roman Catholic churches, he married his brother's widow, Princess, at the time, she was Princess Catherine of Aragon. You already can tell from the name whose daughter is Catherine. Catherine is not just anybody's daughter, The first queen of Henry VIII is the daughter of the couple that unified Spain against the Moors. The Reconquista, the fall of Granada from the Muslims to the Spanish. The Spanish court that entertained Christopher Columbus before he went off to America were the parents of Princess Catherine. Her mother was Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon. That's why she's called Catherine of Aragon. Do you get it? So if you know who her parents were and you know Spanish history, you know that America was colonized in the name of Ferdinand and Isabella. Okay? Then you know how important his wife was. The only problem was that she couldn't produce a male heir. And Henry VIII was in love with another woman, her lady-in-waiting, Anne Boleyn. Now, the problem here is that Henry VIII's father, Henry VII, upon his deathbed, told him, you must have a male heir. Why? Because Henry VIII's mother and grandmother, Henry VIII's grandmothers on both sides, the father's side and the mother's side, Elizabeth Woodville and Margaret Tudor, were both involved in the Battle of Bosworth Field and trying to get rid of King Richard III. And we all know King Richard III, what he did. He killed Henry VIII's uncles, who were boys at the time, in the Tower of London in the months of 1483, when the father or grandfather of Henry VIII, Edward IV, died. So Elizabeth Woodville, who is Henry VIII's grandmother on his mother's side, Elizabeth of York's mother, and Margaret Tudor, who is his grandmother on his father's side, Henry VII's mother, were both involved with the War of the Roses, which ended with the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485, and toppled the king that asked for my kingdom for a horse. Okay. Knowing that, and knowing that the Plantagenets, there were many people who tried to reclaim the Plantagenet throne, or the throne of the Angevin dynasty. Okay? A dynasty that was founded by Henry II in 1154. This dynasty fell in 1485 after the Battle of Bosworth Field was won by Henry VII. And the Tudor dynasty, Henry VIII was only the second monarch of that dynasty. So it was very precarious. And he felt that, being the heir of Henry VII, he ought to produce more sons so that he can continue his dynasty without there being any pretenders to the throne. In fact, during Henry VIII's time, there were pretenders to the throne of England who wanted to topple the Tudor dynasty and bring back the Plantagenet dynasty and all the chaos of the Wars of the Roses back again between the House of Lancaster and the House of York. So this is the reason why he wanted a male heir. Okay? There were not many queens of England before Henry VIII. There was Empress Matilda during the end of the Norman dynasty, but even that, there was contention with her uncle Stephen of Blois. Okay, but here he had daughters actually. So he had a daughter Mary from Catherine, and he wanted a son. So he tried to divorce Catherine, and divorce on the basis that he never slept with her, at least consumed the marriage, or Henry or his brother Arthur slept with and consumed the marriage, and therefore she wasn't a maid, she wasn't a virgin when he married her. That would allow the Vatican to allow for a divorce or a separation, and that would cause scandal really for Catherine of Aragon. But the Pope did not want to do that. Why? The Pope didn't want to do that because the Pope was under Pope ruled the Papal States in Italy, and the Papal States was under what is known as the Holy Roman Empire. And the Holy Roman Empire was ruled in Vienna by Charles V, who was the nephew of Catherine of Aragon. So would you want to destroy the esteem of the auntie of your own emperor? Of course not. So as a result of that, Henry VIII broke away with the Catholic Church, and that's why we have the Church of England today, the Anglican Church. All right? But Anne wasn't able to keep up with that too, and she was also accused of incest with her brother and high treason. She had her head chopped off by a swordsman from France. All because Henry was in love with her lady-in-waiting Jane Seymour. Now, Jane Seymour produced a son for Henry VIII, but died not long after she gave birth. And of course, Thomas Cromwell, knowing that the line of succession was precarious, organized for Henry VIII to marry a princess of Germany, Anne of Cleves, realizing that she was so ugly and that the picture that Holbein had created for her was not what he wanted, he got Thomas Cromwell eventually. Yes. They all got the head chopped off, yeah? In those days, you can't block people on Facebook, so you used to have to use the axe instead. But that shows his nature as a man of will, right? Now, in his 40s, he had an arranged marriage with the Duke of Norfolk, who introduced him to Catherine Howard, an 18-year-old girl, who, by the way, had a boyfriend. And because they were so in love, the boyfriend and him and her were so in love, the family and the king was possibly impotent by that time. He had a wound that was festering from an accident that happened while horse riding with Thomas Seymour and the other siblings of Jane Seymour at a time when he was courting Jane Seymour. So he had that festering with him. But because of that, they felt that he wouldn't be able to commit in the bed, and therefore there won't be another heir. So they thought that they could allow the boyfriend to sleep with Catherine Howard in secret and produce an heir for the king. But when word of this got out and by the way, this was a Catholic side. Duke of Norfolk was Catholic, so this was a Catholic faction that wanted to overturn the Protestant faction. When the Protestant faction under Thomas Cranmer found out about all this, he later reported it to the king, who was enraged and mad and thought it was pure love, He thought he was in love with Catherine and thought Catherine was in love with him. So eventually, he had both Culpeper and Catherine put to the scaffold. Chop, chop. And then, of course, Thomas Seymour's wife? Was Catherine Parr. She was going to the king to confess about trying to let go of accusations made against her husband. Against someone that she had that had wronged her. Okay, and she had every right for him to go to the gallows for that. But she forgave him, and out of that, the king fell in love with her, and Thomas Seymour was asked to give up his wife or his fiancée, as a caretaker for Henry VIII until he died in 1547. So we have here a king who had created a change. Catholic England was all Roman Catholic before Henry VIII. After Henry VIII, the Protestant Reformation was starting to bloom because of him and his tear away from the church, but also because of various social things that happened during his time. But remember, his will kind of started it too. So again, another man from the nomadic side. Now, I was saying that Tunku Abdul Rahman was from this side, from the agriculturalist side, because he followed, and that was a very good thing too, because otherwise the British would not have had much confidence to give him the power in 1957. You see, David Marshall, an Iranian Jew living in Singapore, had more of the kind of similar esteem to Lee Kuan Yew, wanting to make Singapore independent, but he didn't get it because he couldn't get the trust of the British people to give him that. Tunku Abdul Rahman did through his appeasement. So there you go. But agriculturalists, there's always good things for you, and I would like to celebrate the fact I'm a nomad. I'm a nomad. I'm my own person, and I'm my own business. Now, I'm good in history, obviously, as you can see, but also and in storytelling. But I have another part of my business, which is about conflict resolution, mental health, and also about creative writing along those lines too, if you wish, or even to create the author in you and tap into those things that you never knew was there, as well as an English course. So, there's a lot of things that are mine. And in that sense, I wish to just advertise about these two different types of human beings so that we can each identify which one we are and strive toward what suits us. If you ask me to work for a company, it's like putting a square peg into a round hole. If you ask a company person to start a business, people who've been loyal to a company, it's just the same thing. It's like a triangle into a square hole or something like that. It will not fit. So what I'm trying to say here is that, by looking at the case studies of these three, I would say marvelous people, I would say people who've changed history, and there are many more, of course, Albert Einstein, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, but my Karl Marx, Adam Smith, but my manifesto is about something else. It's about the authorins. It's my creation. And I really, really encourage you to listen to my stories and to see what you can get from it. And of course, to be involved in the classes and courses that I have. All right, so if anything, just come and DM me on Facebook or DM me in LinkedIn. Let's have some kind of conversation and see where we can go from there. All right? All right, thank you for listening.